who lives here in Philadelphia. A certified hand therapist is somebody who specializes in the treatment of anything that goes wrong from the shoulder to the fingertips. So I work at Rothman Orthopedics here in Philly, and most of my patients have either had surgery or are about to have surgery on something that went wrong from their shoulder to their hand. So I'm basically micro-focused on the upper extremity all the time. And I'm very excited. This is my first time presenting at a Comic-Con. In January, I presented to a bunch of classical musicians. And because I'm just super interested in the impact of using objects and interfaces on the human body. And I think I see so many conditions that I think are preventable. We just have the skills and the tools. Sometimes it doesn't take much, honestly, to avoid injury or to kind of reverse or mitigate the impact of injury. So thanks for coming. We talked about optimize your pain, power up your biomechanics. And the illustration is just some of the many muscles that are involved in some of the actions you may be taking while aiming. The thumb is heavily featured, and I'll go over some other stuff with you. So in this, so my patients love to give me nicknames, one of which is Jedi Handmaster, and I recently started illustrating the nicknames that they give me. And the illustration is the ulnar nerve, one of the 5 nerves of each arm. And so what I'm hoping that you will take away from this talk is just info about anatomy, demonstrate some of the biomechanical principles that guide a lot of repetitive strain injuries that folks get, honestly, just from using computers or phones all the time. Can anybody hear me? Okay. Great, thank you.
Oh, the microphones there.
Hmm?
Microphones.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah, good point. And then also, this is show you some quick manual therapy tricks. So by manual therapy, I mean like massaging aspects of your arms and hands. And then empower you to identify some bracing strategies or just ergonomic principles to keep in mind when you are at your computer or in the last month here, how many of you had wrist, hand, elbow, shoulder pain as dangling Anybody? I find that a lot of the time people just ignore symptoms. They're like, oh, okay, I'll just take a short break and I'll come back to it later. And it's ubiquitous, right? So we're not taught. So I have a rant I go into with my patients where I say, I wish that we were taught how to take care of our hands, like while we're learning how to read and learning math and stuff, because this is one of our main interfaces with the world, and we kind of ignore them until we have to pay attention to them. And so I'm hoping to change that a little bit. Oh, there we go. So, as I said, I'm a hand therapist. I have done a few things. I used to be in city planning, and then I went to Jefferson here in Philly for occupational therapy. And then I've been an adjunct professor at Thomas Jefferson University for 4 years, teaching people hand therapy related skills. I also used to be a yoga teacher and a personal trainer. So I've been thinking about the human body, both macro and micro, for about 15 years. And hand therapy, like I said, hand, wrist, elbow, shoulder. And a certified hand therapist can be an occupational therapist or a physical therapist. Occupation actually doesn't mean jobs, although we can help people get back to work. Occupation honestly means everything, from getting dressed, sleeping, being able to hold a sponge when you scrub yourself in the shower, being able to use the bathroom, being able to drive. Occupational therapists who only rehab people so they can go back to driving. So it's a pretty broad field, but I zoomed in and decided to just focus on the upper extremity. So when you have a hand problem, or hand, wrist, lot of times people, I realize, don't even know where to see. A lot of times people will say, okay, I'm just going to go to physical therapy, but actually it's best to see a hand therapist because there's a lot that can go wrong, right? I spent the last 4 years only treating from here to here. So it's pretty dense. So it's helpful to see a hand specialist, hand therapist, so that you can actually get the kind of the micro focus care that you need to optimize your outcomes. And as I was going down the rabbit hole of classical musicians and tattoo artists and esports players, like people who are like using their hands a lot. I was looking at statistics for injury, and actually I was also on the ergonomics subreddit and one of the esports subreddits, and people were talking about how players have to like leave the game because they blow out their wrists, right? Because we are using so many of the tiny muscles in the hands, shoulders, forearm, without kind of maintaining them, and so eventually they give out. But that doesn't have to be the case, actually. So I'm going to kind of zip through the anatomy of the upper extremity. Zip because it's fairly dense, and I'm trying to distill it into kind of like key points, because I find that it's helpful if you understand the pieces, and then we go into ways that you can mitigate any symptoms or issues that you might have now or that you might have in the future. So bones, starting from the ground up, bones of the upper extremity, there are many. The wrist has 8 bones just by itself. It has 2 rows of 4 that basically sit, and they have to be mobile, but they also have to be stable, right? So these bones, A, provide the foundation, but B, bones become very heavily influenced by the position that they're in. So we spend most of our lives here, right? And we don't spend a lot of time like reaching behind us unless you're like reaching for a seatbelt or like and so your bones can literally start to orient forward, right? And if we don't take the time to kind of reset them, the tissues, muscles, nerves, blood vessels also kind of take on their form, and that's so that you're able to use your body optimally. And then tendons are kind of the power cables so the tendons will connect to bones, and then you can kind of transmit your muscle power. So your muscle contracts, the tendon cable pulls on the bone, and then lets you do what you want to do. And so when people end up with things like tendinitis, it can be because the muscle that's acting on the cable is so strained and so tight that it's really straining and degrading the joint integrity over time, right? So if you do enough muscle action, eventually they start to give out. Muscles, like I said, kind of like power sources. Muscles are heavily influenced by our diet, for example, by if we're hydrated, if we're breathing, oxygen is huge, is a huge driver of the body. So as I was saying, if your bones are kind of caving in, your lung capacity can literally diminish because you're not breathing fully, right? If you're really intensely into a game you're playing or trying to finish up a project, I notice I breathe fairly shallowly, and so my blood just isn't as oxygenated, and then my muscles are kind of deprived of nutrients that they could be getting. More muscles, shoulder muscles, pretty huge, shoulder and neck muscles actually. So I notice when I'm sitting at my computer doing notes, I know better, right? But my shoulders go up, and I'm kind of, actually you might be able to hear that my voice sounds a little different. But here on the shoulder, right, my pec muscles are pretty tight because again, I'm letting my leg forward here, those get tight. And then the yellow is some of the nerves that feed your arm. Those get squished and tight, and you start to literally diminish electrical signal amplitude that you're able to send into the arm because your electric circuit is getting squished by your tight muscles. More muscles, rotator cuff, not something we think about until we're old and something breaks, but optimizing your rotator cuff health by making sure you have mobility, again, because we never think about that, we're living here, and our rotator cuff muscles literally tighten and lengthen in this kind of awkward position, and again, start to impede the electrical conductivity of those nerves that come out of your neck, the brachial plexus, and start to diminish the function of your upper extremities. Biceps, triceps, those are more commonly known muscles. More muscles. So this is an interesting thing I didn't realize people knew. I don't know if I knew this until I put my hand there. Most of the muscles that bend and extend your fingers are actually here, close to your elbow. So when you're using, a friend who's into sailing recently reached out to me and was like, hey, I need to strengthen my hands so that I can pull the rope while I'm sailing. And should I get one of those like grippy pulling things that you squeeze? And I was like, oh no, because you're actually strengthening these muscles and not the intrinsic muscles of your hands, actually will give you more power in your grip. Additionally, the pinky side of your hand is where the power of your grip comes from. So ironically, which we don't really think about, so those squeezy, grippy things are more like a blunt instrument, I find, and are not really like a fine-tuned instrument you need to strengthen the intrinsic muscles, the muscles in your hand. Alrighty, so these are the extensors. They spread the fingers. Those are located here. People who develop tennis elbow, sadly not because they play tennis, it's because these extensor muscles get so strained and tight they start to pull on the lateral epicondyle. The tendon, right, I was saying the tendons can get so forceful from the tight muscle that they start to impede pain, they start to, trigger pain at the elbow. So you start to see how everything's kind of a pretty interconnected system. Also, if you're trying to do a powered grip, your wrist has to go into extension. So even if you don't think you're using those muscles, you are actually. Usually we're focused on flex, flex, flex. The extensors kick in when you need to really grip and sustain. Also, when you're using your computer, extensors are working pretty hard too. Other muscles that rotate up and down, interosseous muscles. There's muscles on the front that squeeze your fingers together. There's also on the back that spread your fingers apart. So if you're doing strengthening tasks or not optimizing both sides, these guys and these guys, the system is out of balance. I like to say that the front and back of your hand have a symbiotic relationship, and if you favor one over the other, you end up with a system that's functioning suboptimally. Thenar, hypothenar muscles. So thenar muscles are your thumb muscles. Hypothenar muscles are this meaty part on the pinky side of your hand, also help with grip. Not a side of the hand we think about very often because we're so busy favoring the index and thumb side. More thumb movers. The thumb is a pretty complicated. The thumb is a pretty complicated instrument. So there's muscles that have pinching. There's actually three different types of pinches that I assess when patients come to me. Opposition. This is one that we're familiar with because I know. Because I am a dork, I'm always looking at people's hands, and on the trolley, I'm watching people surf, or do people still say surf? They don't say surf the internet, yeah? I don't know. Swiping, there we go. Our thumbs are like working overtime. And then blood vessels, as I was saying, if your blood is not oxygenated because your lung capacity is compromised because you're grounded and literally squishing your lung capacity in your diaphragm, your system isn't functioning optimally. That's one of the reasons why we're told to exercise, just so you can pump blood, nutrient-rich blood to your body and help your body get rid of waste. Nerves. I spend a lot of time with these because they literally power, or they kind of give your muscles the juice fine motor tasks that you need to perform just to be a human if you have arms and hands. And I noticed people will say, oh, I have carpal tunnel, right? But sometimes they mean they have tendinitis, or they mean I have cubital tunnel because their elbows are bent all the time because they're squishing your ulnar nerve. Carpal tunnel is the median nerve, which is right in the center of your wrist here. So if you're gripping a lot, typing a lot, the median nerve literally gets kind of suffocated and squished and then doesn't send the signals that it needs to into your hands. So people will get tingling in these 3 fingers and half of the ring finger and think, oh, you know, well, I'll just rest it for a little bit, or, you know, I'll just put a brace on. But if you're not addressing the tightness in the carpal tunnel by stretching, the nerves are also, again, are an electric circuit. So if some patients I find will have compression of the median nerve, actually not at the carpal tunnel, over here, also could be here, also could be here. So it could be super helpful to find a hand therapist to kind of guide you through these symptoms, because like, for example, I had a patient who had a negative EMG, like the nerve test they do. Some of you, I don't know if you've heard of it, they poke you with needles. It's very horrible, I've heard. And her EMG was negative for carpal tunnel, but that's because her median nerve wasn't compressed here, it was actually compressed here. So she was confused because she was like, wait, but my diagnosis is carpal tunnel, because she was showing median nerve signs of nerve compression, but when I alleviated her tension here, she felt better. And then once I addressed that, she had some other issues going too, because inevitably everything is connected, and we often ignore one problem until another problem takes us to our therapist. So that was a fun patient to work with. Okay. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I am a visual person, so I like graphics like this because they show you, so these are your neck bones, and all of these nerves influence some function in your arm, wrist, elbow, and hand, right? This color chart also shows more of that relationship. So again, I'm not going to get into the weeds of that. I just thought it might be helpful for you to understand visually how being in a rounded posture, also a head forward posture, which we inevitably get into, can compromise the function of your arms and hands. Nerves, heat, tension, and compression. So tight muscles and tension. When you're gaming, it's not so much about tension necessarily, it's more about compression. So your tight muscles you're building up these usually pretty small muscles over time. Nerves get compressed, nerves get cranky, and then you get the numbness, tingling, and dysfunction. Before I go on, does this like trigger a light bulb for anybody about something they were dealing with, or something a friend was sharing with them that they're struggling with, that this is illuminated for you? Yeah? Anybody care to share? Yeah.
I had a buddy where when he was gaming at home, he would always be like, he would be fine. But whenever he went to a LAN center, his pinky would go numb. And he couldn't go, I think it might have been because he was on the corner of the desk rather than being flat.
Yeah. So the ulnar nerve, which comes up through your funny bone, comes up through a tiny canal here called Guillaume's canal, and then it kind of bridges over your hands. And so, if you're squishing that nerve, you're squishing that part of your wrist, you're literally impeding the electric conductivity of that nerve, especially over time, especially if you're holding your phone like that, right? We're in ulnar deviation all the time. And then there's a muscle here called the flexor carpi ulnaris that connects to the pisiform bone here, and that muscle literally gets shortened, so that you kind of lose the ability to counteract that position over time. Yeah. So the large muscles, shoulder, torso, legs, are a different category of muscles versus the small muscles of your hands. They're good for short bursts of movement. contractions, but they need just as much love as big muscles. So when we think of exercising, we're like, your bicep curls, tricep extensions, squats, glutes are big one people like to exercise these days, but you gotta exercise those intrinsic muscles too, interosseous muscles, opponents, and we'll get into ways to do that. As I had said, nerve compression, tight, short muscles, weak muscles, right? Because if you live your life here, the muscles in the back lose the ability to pull you back, literally. So then the nerves that come out from your spinal cord brachial plexus, your body kind of loses the ability to decompress those muscles. And then, so this was I love to draw. This was an illustration I did I gave an injury prevention workshop at the Curtis Institute of Music here in Philly. And I loved doing these kind of anatomy studies. So your friend with the numb pinky, she would have a numb pinky too over time because the yellow is the ulnar nerve coming out from the thoracic outlet, coming up through the elbow, so the funny bone, and then it kind of bridges out. But yeah, it gets pretty squished over time. So if she is not taking the time to do what is called ulnar nerve glide, literally floss and kind of soothe the nerves through this is a glide fracturing networks. There are a plethora of them, but this is the one that I like to do. This is the most successful for a lot of my patients. You start to see how over time that can imprint. So her bicep is going to be pretty tight. Her tricep's going to be very weak because she's not spending much time extending her elbow. And so Curtis Institute of Music, it's a conservatory. My husband likes to remind me it's one of the best ones in the world. And they're practicing for hours because that's their job, right? And so if they're not counteracting those positions they're in, then injury is kind of inevitable. Another illustration I did was the pianist. I like to show these to my patients because with this one you can see how the radius bone in the forearm is literally having to pivot around, right? So if you're spending your day at your laptop, your PC, your radius bone, is rotated like that for a lot of the day. And then the interosseous membrane between the bones gets tight, right? And I mean, who among us remembers to actually take a moment to supinate their forearms and extend their wrists? No. So that's why I like this illustration. Also, you can see these are the extensor muscles. That's these guys, ones that spread and extend. And those are actually working pretty hard too, right? Because when you're reaching for keys on the keyboard, you have to use those guys also. There's a therapist in New York named Dr. Aviva Wolf, and she does work with Juilliard students, and so that's her name on the bottom because I ended up collaborating with her on this kind of educational content because she's done a lot of work on factors that you can modify for injury prevention, factors that like non-physical factors that can affect your performance, such as anxiety, stress. I know when I'm stressed, my shoulders get up, and I forget to take care of myself. I forget to hydrate. I forget to breathe quickly, and yeah, I just wanted to touch on those factors a little bit. So this is for music that's still relevant, right? Bent head. I feel like, honestly, my head is like this a lot of times, so I end up having to do chin tucks, especially if I'm trying to, hand therapists do glute care. So if I'm taking out sutures or cleaning a wound, inevitably I'm doing this. And then I have to remember to take my cervical spine or my neck in the opposite direction. This is for piano, but also relevant for computer. If you're reaching for a different play, the tension on your pectoral muscles is even worse than if you're sitting in a more, some people call 80-90 position. Your elbows are more flexed to 90. Your hips are more flexed to 90, but some people believe that you need to have a little bit more extension. I actually don't give my patients tips on like the best keyboard and the best chair and all this stuff because my focus is on how to maintain your body so that you can kind of live your life away from the keyboard and away from the computer. And there's a plethora of resources out there as far as like the best keyboard, different for everybody. So I never tell my patients buy this keyboard or this device or this chair because honestly that's not my area of expertise. Mine is on the impact of your environment on your body, so I try to focus on that. Warning signs that we ignore: pain, tingling, increased stiffness. Fatigue is a tricky one because we don't realize it means that we're kind of moving towards injury zone. Getting more tired over time is a key. Swelling, tremors, so being shaky, fatigue and weakness kind of go hand in hand. Common diagnoses. I mentioned cubital tunnel, which is the pinky side of your hand. Carpal tunnel, very popular. You know that one. Thoracic outlet syndrome, not as common. It's when the thoracic outlet region of your shoulder gets so squished because your scalene muscles from the neck, and your pectoral muscles, so they kind of like intersect here. When they get so tight, they start to squish the nerves. And so I had somebody recently who is a 20-something-year-old barber, and she couldn't work her full shift because her arms would start to shake because her thoracic outlet was too tight. And so in like 2 to 3 sessions of focusing on alleviating that tension, she started being able to work for more and more hours. But then I had to really encourage her to take breaks during the day to do focus stretches to alleviate tension on the thoracic outlet. And she's only in her 20s, so you know, I'm like, we need to get you set up so you can keep working for years. Radial tunnel syndrome, not as common, but it is the radial nerve is one of the 5 nerves that we focus on in the upper extremity. Comes out through your elbow here, and then also can get squished in this little tunnel here. So if your extensor muscles are tight, your radial nerve can get unhappy. Neck pain, back pain, tendinitis, thumb pain, and then deeper veins tenosynovitis, which I learned a few months ago is what people call gamer's thumb, but it's when you start to have pain in the first dorsal compartment of the wrist, and oftentimes it's because your thumb, so think about how you hold your phone, yeah, how you hold your controller, right, over time that area just gets super tense.
Actually, yeah, I know that because I have a Nintendo Switch, I play Mario Kart on 8.
Yeah.
And when I'm holding the 8 button for speed,
right,
yeah, it tends to really hurt.
Yeah, yeah, unfortunately, and I'll show you some ways that you can alleviate that too. But yeah. Placement of computer screen. So I had to make this slide for music stand, but you can start to see how where you're looking can influence the mechanics of your body. And then proper biomechanics typing. Again, not something we think about too much, but those shoulders are unhappy. This might be okay-ish, but I'm worried about that pressure on her wrists over time. So her ulnar nerve or her median nerve might start to complain over time from that position, especially if she's resting the wrist down. This screen is a bit low, so over time, her levator scapulae muscles, which helps her lift her shoulders often get tight, more tightening up of the pec muscles, and more and diminished breathing capacity. Before I get into exercises, stretches, and tendon glides, does anybody have any other thoughts, observations, questions? Yeah.
So I have restless leg syndrome, so I'm always like bouncing my leg. I was kind of curious if it has any good or bad stuff to it. Like, is it bad or good in any capacity?
I don't know. Because the downside of being a hand therapist is I don't really think about much beyond here.
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
So my question was, I have experience with some of those like warning signs that
Yeah.
listed over there. What is the best way to navigate between maybe seeing someone who's like you in my town through my primary, or you know what I mean? That like how does that process work?
Yeah. So usually you get a script from so the hand therapy certification commission. So if you look up like CHT search, so CHT is a certified hand therapist. Not every hand therapist is a certified hand therapist. Certified hand therapist is somebody who's treated the upper extremity for 4,000 hours, so only the upper extremity, has a minimum of 3 years of practice, and has studied and passed the exam that like fewer than 8,000 practitioners in the world have passed. So that's one person you could see, but you can also see a hand therapist who's like specializing in hands and working towards a CHT, which I was until last year, right? So it doesn't mean they're not qualified necessarily, but if you look at this, at the CHT search, it might help you identify clinics that have hand therapists, and if that hand therapist like doesn't take your insurance or isn't in your area, it might be able to connect you with somebody. But yeah, so you do a CHT search, but what you want to do from your doctor or primary care is just get a generic therapy script. I'm an occupational therapist. Most CHTs are OTs, some are PTs. So it might be helpful to get a script that says occupational therapy / physical therapy if you don't have any specific clinician in mind. And then you find a therapist. I know some states will so in some states I wouldn't need a script to see you, but in PA I do. So I tell them, people say, oh, I need work on my hand, just get a generic script that says wrist pain therapy, and then I can see the person. Does that help?
Yeah, that does help actually. And then I do have a follow-up thing.
Sure. Yeah.
For in a work setting,
Yeah.
like you said, the harbor.
Yeah.
For a certain amount of hours, I do feel like I'm like by hour 6 or whatever. Sometimes, the days are bad days. Sometimes I physically cannot continue. Do you have any advice for navigating HR in that sense and how that would work, or is that more
Yeah, why can't you go on? What do you feel?
Like right here, I was shooting that I just cannot function.
Yeah. I'll get into ways that you can alleviate that. So HR is I'm gonna just bring it back to just being a human, living in a body. But yeah, I'll cover that question soon. Okay. So the first thing that I like to do, this is something that I do for myself. It's helpful for patients when they're injured or had surgery, but it's called a differential tendon glide, right? So the flexor digitorum profundus is the tendon that bends the tip of your finger. Flexor digitorum superficialis bends the middle joint of your finger. And then the extensor digitorum communis are these guys. I tend to have pretty prominent extensor tendons. You may be able to see them kind of poking out a little bit. So what I often tell my patients, actually let's do this together. So straight fingers, I want you to exaggerate the straight. We're gonna do a hook this, like a claw, good, and then we're gonna extend the fingers. Let's do a full fist, and extend the fingers. Let's do a tabletop, good, extend the fingers, and then a straight fist, so where you can see your fingertips. Did anybody feel any stretches with that? They're fairly gentle, yeah, but these are things that I just do in the course of my day. If I have particularly busy days, and if you look up tendon glides on the internet, there are a ton of resources.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I've seen people crack their knuckles as to stretch. Is that appropriate?
I mean, it's kind of neutral. Some people have the ability to crack them, some people don't. I started cracking my metacarpal phalangeal joints a lot because I know that I'm favoring my flexors, especially when I'm working on my patients. So I started for me, I'm hyperextending just to take the tension out. So it's kind of net neutral, I think. Yeah.
And actually, to add on to that, when you mentioned cracking fingers, I usually just do like this.
Yeah.
That's the old-fashioned one. That's my question is for this.
Yeah.
I actually did feel a pull motion back?
Yeah, it depends on the level of the stroke. Sometimes that can be a whole rabbit hole of like splinting to make sure, because some people's fingers get pretty stiff after the stroke. It can go into this position. So that's like, I can give you some more tips or answer more questions about that, but that's kind of like its own.
Well, I did take a picture.
Okay,
So I
cool.
do appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure, yeah.
Should you be trying to keep your the rest of your arm in any particular position when you're doing these?
So I think it's helpful because we live our lives here to do them, to eventually be able to do them without looking at your hands actually. A lot of time, in the beginning I often tell people to do them here where they can see their fingers moving. But eventually if you can do them down here, sometimes you can even feel the connection between the muscles and the fingers. Okay. Okay, so simple things, you can use a hair tie, rubber band, is to strengthen your dorsal and interosseous muscles, maybe your abductors, and, simple exercise. Again, we think so much about flexor, 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 that we don't restore balance of the system by strengthening our extensors. Okay? So that can be a really helpful one. Also, honestly, for some people, just putting their hands on the table and literally doing a finger walk side to side can be pretty intense because you're working fairly small muscles and you're opening up your carpal tunnel, right? And you'll notice in the beginning that you might do it with a lot of wrist tension because you're just not used to using those little muscles, which is ironic because you're using the little muscles all the time, just not in a more fine-tuned way. Extensor pollicis brevis and longus. That's, I'm not sure, you may be able to see it kind of bulging out on me here. It's a muscle that gets underworked because we're spending our lives pinch, pinch, swipe, swipe, and we just don't really think about it. So this is one where you could use a hair tie or rubber band to extend that out. Another one you can do with your hand on the table. Sometimes I have people do like a lift. So they slide out and do a lift. And that can get pretty fatigued. So you want it to be flat, flat. So there's no tension on your wrists at all. And it just without working. Okay. Massage tools. So this starts to get into what you were asking about the sharp pain is because the tension in the muscles is building up to the point where it's compressing the nerves. So I have to massage my arms on the weekend because I use my arms and hands so much when I'm helping other people's arms and hands. So I saw a really great tip on, I'll share my TikTok with you once we're done because I share tips on how to maintain your hands. But a wine fork is a great way to massage your hands, thenar and hypothenars especially. You can use a foam roller. I think sometimes they have like smaller ones that you can use. One of my patients loves using a dryer ball. Actually, you don't need a lot of tension. You kind of just rub it in between your hands to massage the tension out. And then I have one of these guys. It's really great for alleviating tension, like in your upper trapezius, supraspinatus. With this point, you could get some of your pectoral muscle. You want to be careful so you're not like poking yourself in the armpit and compressing your nerves further. But these are some ways that you could start to alleviate tension in your arms. Stretches. These are really great stretches to do during the course of your day. This is a good one for releasing tightness in the hand, right in the intrinsic muscles, especially if you extend your thumbs out of the way. And then you might notice that your shoulders just went up. Can you drop them down for me? Yeah. Cool. Another one you can do is this one. Bringing the fingers together, you might feel a stretch across your outer arm. It's a really easy one. These are great too. This is a great one for alleviating tension in the carpal tunnel, right? And your extrinsic flexor muscles. You can release your extrinsic extensor muscles by going down. Again, dropping the shoulders down because your body loves to work harder than it needs to. And then this palm stretch is also really good, right? Because we have a lot of tension in there, but we don't think about it. When we're going to yoga, like when I was a yoga teacher, people would be like, I can't touch my toes. I was like, why is this the universal marker? Like loose hamstrings. What about loose palms? Well, you don't want them to be too loose, but yeah. Stretching out triceps, biceps, stretching out pectorals in the doorway. Very important, right, to alleviate that tension on the brachial plexus and the thoracic outlet. Neck stretches for your scalene. So those scalenes that I mentioned that combined with the tension on your pectorals to squish the brachial plexus and lead to things like thoracic outlet syndrome. There's anterior, middle, and posterior. So front, middle, and back. Those muscles can get super tight. She's holding onto her head. Honestly, for a lot of people, I could just do this with my arm by my side, and I'm already getting a stretch to my middle scalenes. Right, if I drop my chin, that's a different stretch. If I lift my head back, that's a different stretch. Again, a group of muscles that, if I'm living my life here, just don't get any love. So these are really simple, accessible ways to start to correct the imprint of the environment on the body. Again, because everybody needs stretches, this is from my classical musician presentation. The next stretch is basically a scaling stretch, but we can get into shoulder rolls. That starts to get into helping your shoulder, because your shoulder blades have to be pretty mobile actually, right? And so as you're doing the shoulder rolls, that helps your shoulder blades kind of glide across your rib cage. Stretching out your low back, that's something else we don't think about. If you're sitting upright all the time, it can be helpful to take a moment and move your legs wide to kind of shake it out. I find that for me, this one gives me a nice stretch also across my my neck and the top of my shoulder. Chin tucks, I mentioned those before from doing a lot of this with my patients. Neck rotation is really good. I find it's really good to do neck rotation when you're laying on your back. Actually, it's really nice. More shoulder rolls, your shoulder mobility is key. And I was going to talk about the effects of heat, right? Because you can use heat if you're too tight. People ask me about this all the time. If you're trying to lengthen out and massage muscles, it's helpful to heat them first. At the end of a long work day, if you're feeling sore and swollen, you can ice. Right, so that's how I use those modalities usually. Modifying position. So for some people, it's helpful to buy. They have like silicone sleeves that would cover. This is a modified one. You could get one that covers your finger if your thumb is getting sore from pressing on your controller. That's one option. That's why I included this. Also, wrist widgets help to temper tendinitis. Helpful to talk to a professional before you purchase any of these things. I just wanted you to see that there are other options besides just a regular brace for modifying positions. Some people end up needing to sleep with devices that help mitigate pain. This is one for the ulnar nerve, right? Especially if you're sleeping like this. So some people find those helpful, sleeping with the elbow straight. All right, and that is all. If you wanted to, who knows how long TikTok will be available in the States, but for now, if you want to add me on TikTok and ask me questions, I am happy to make a video that relates to an issue that you have, because there's a plethora of ways that we hurt in our upper extremities, and I'm happy to answer questions. Right? Also, there's tips on there too of videos I've made already that you might find helpful. I made one about tattoo artists recently, because the vibration of the tool can lead to injuries down the line. I can come back to this screen too. A bunch of references. A lot of them, not sure how helpful these would be, but a lot of them are kind of classical musician related. And then another nickname my patients have for me is the mad scientist. So I just drew this last week, and my student, Kay, who's learning about hand therapy, helped me. Yeah, thank you. points if you notice the bulk in hand.
Yeah.
Any questions? Any other questions? Let me go back to the TikTok screen. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I noticed too, like whenever they have people, they have their clients on the table.
Yeah.
Do like a back or a leg tattoo.
Yeah.
Are you always just like,
Yeah, I know. I'm always like, oh no.
yeah, because they always mention that they have to be hunchback because
Yeah.
they're going over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to do that tattoo.
Yeah. See, this is why I go down my rabbit hole of populations that need information. Yeah. Yep.
Every time I wake up, my hand's always tingly for about an hour. I mean,
Like every day?
some days.
Yeah. Which,
in the morning, which
like your
is
whole
weird.
hand?
Both whole hands. A lot of times right hand.
How do you sleep? Like this?
No, I don't do that. My hands are on the sides.
You might have tension here.
Ooh.
Different part of the circuit. Yeah.
Wow.
Why is the vibration concerning for tattooers?
Because over time, the accumulated effects, because your body has nerve, there's different types of sensory fibers, like that pick up tactile information from the world, and they get overloaded over time, right? Because it's just like, that's not natural. So if you combine that with the tense position of your hands, it just exacerbates tension, leads to weakness, leads to kind of like a loss of ability to discern tactile input, so you kind of get kind of numb more of the time. Yeah, because there's like nerve fibers that pick up vibration, pain, temperature, but your vibration ones are just like working overtime. Yeah. Any other questions? You can also reach out to me on the internet.
It's same thing on Instagram, right?
Oh yeah, actually I just like, these days, I can barely keep up. Yeah, so I usually end up just going on TikTok more recently. I do have an Instagram, I just haven't posted on it in a minute, but I have one. So, do you mind sharing your video with me actually?
That's what I was about to say.
Thank you, yeah, that'd be good.
That's why I needed your Instagram so I can,
Gotcha, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of bringing it back to video games. Is
Yeah.
there anything you would like to see from video game creators to reduce the tendency of injuries? Fewer rapid button presses.
You know what would be awesome? If they put in like a module for just like quick hand arm stretches, like in the game somewhere, like at in the beginning. You don't have to click on it, but just like offer the option, just plant the seed, because inevitably nobody thinks about it until something hurts, right? And I find that that doesn't need to be the case. So I feel like just embedding, that's kind of what I'm hoping, even though like my vision is like everybody thinks about handheld, but yeah, just like embedding it, so it's just like breathing. Oh yeah, I'm gonna take a moment to like do some tendon glides, right? Yeah. Oh, cool. Cool. I hope that this was helpful. Anybody, like, what was the most helpful, because this is the first time I've given this iteration of this talk. What was the most helpful thing? Anything?
Hand exercises.
Hand exercises, yeah.
Yes.
Like I mentioned with my mom with her stroke on her left.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that'll help out with the fingers.
Okay, good. Yeah, anybody else? Anything? Huh?
Doing it in real time. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't know that hand therapy existed until I was in my 30s. And I was like, that's just ridiculous. Huh? No, I'm 42. Yeah.
Well, you still look good.
Thanks.
Old guy.
I know, right? It can be good and bad. It's funny when people talk to me like I'm a little grasshopper, and I'm just like, dude, do you understand how much life experience I have? Yeah, thank you so much. I will, actually, I'm going to give you my email. I feel like that would be easier for me. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.